Hey everyone, it's Brad and Josh here, and we welcome you to We'll Bring the Popcorn, the ultimate film and TV podcast.
Now I want to pivot us into our first film review of the week. We have Tron Ares. So this is the follow-on to Tron Legacy that came out over a decade ago now. Like, it's been a long time since we've visited this Tron universe. And here, this takes place once again in this futuristic world. You've got the Dillinger Company, who is kind of the prime focus of this film. They have their own grid. Embedded into that grid is a character known as Ares, who's kind of like Dillinger's secret weapon kind of thing, to be this perfect soldier that could be used for futuristic battles and military, where it's very interesting how they put all this together, where you can use what's called the permanence code to help bring these characters to life in the real world with laser, some wild laser 3D printing, making them real and making them evaluate. But it does come with a little bit of a caveat, a little light spoilers here, but these characters can only last 28, 29 minutes in the real world. Minutes. So it's very, very limited time, but you can keep recreating them over and over again, and it kind of just takes off from there. But I gotta say, I was hoping going into this film that we were going to expect bare minimum out of the film, visually phenomenal, along with incredible music that's set to, Trent Reznor from Nine Inch Nails is making the music in this film. And I gotta say, on that end, bare minimum, it did not disappoint, because visually the effects in this film were incredible, and the music was phenomenal as well.
Yeah, visually it was stunning. It looked incredible. They actually made the light cycles. They made drivable versions of it because they wanted to attach cameras and make it feel more visceral and real, that instead of, it's heavy on CG with stuff, but compared to Tron Legacy, which notably had, younger faces put on characters and other stuff that looked kind of rough, like this visually looked stunning. The sound was great. Yeah, Nine Inch Nails did a great job. Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross did a great job doing the soundtrack to it that fit the Tron world, a little mix of what Daft Punk did with Legacy, along with their own sound and stuff with it. It does fail a little bit with the story, because it was 21 years between Tron and Tron Legacy. And Tron Legacy revolved around Flint's son, Sam, and trying to take back over Incom and getting put in the grid and finding what happened to his father. And, that ended with him and Cora getting out. And then this one revolves around them trying to bring characters out, but they can only last. So there's so much that they kind of contradict that Tron Legacy did. Plus, we also barely get, and this is a light spoiler as well, we barely get anything about Sam and Cora in this. Like, there's some breadcrumbs and some ties that I'm not going to fully spoil on that, but it just kind of, it's a third film, but it's kind of a reboot, but it's kind of not, and it pays a lot of homage to stuff that came before, but it kind of it started off decently strong, because as you said, you got Dillinger System, they have their own grid, they're wanting to bring everything from the grid in the real world for military, to sell it to countries, to sell it to companies, while Incom, who have a new CEO who's actually looking for that permanence to do right. So you have good and evil. You're pretty cut and dry, good and evil. Dillinger's evil, Incom's good.
Yeah, very clear line.
But it tries to involve Flynn in it quite a bit. And I think it fails a good amount of what it tries to do, with still including Jeff Bridges' Flynn and bringing that world in, because most of what it doesn't really make sense to the other two Tron films.
Yeah, it definitely feels like its own kind of standalone, while paying a little bit of homage to what's come before it. You don't get a ton of Kevin Flynn in this film. Jeff Bridges has a very brief appearance in the movie as kind of a guide to Jared Leto's Ares character. Jared Leto is very much at the forefront of this film for a good chunk of it. He kind of, in a lot of ways, carries the film, good, wrong, bad, and different, however you feel about that. Greta Lee is Eve, the CEO of Incom, who is also one of the central characters of this film. She does a good job with what she's given in this movie, and I think she's kind of a bright spot in this film, who is trying to pay homage to her sister, who was co-CEO of the company, who had unfortunately passed, and trying to honor her memory, because she plays kind of this jaded CEO while coming back into the fold a little bit more to kind of it's kind of flimsy, right? So it's kind of like doing this to kind of honor her sister to do some of these altruistic things that she had wanted to do and getting her hands on the permanence code first before the Dillinger Company can catch them. Give a little bit of love as well to Evan Peters, who plays Julian Dillinger, the main villain in this film, who's the head of the Dillinger Company, and he's a bad guy who's doesn't think he's a bad guy necessarily.
Which none of them do.
They never do, but he's very obvious, like, I'm fine, I'm doing this because this is what I'm supposed to do as the head of this company. And then he slowly starts making these evil decisions, and you see him kind of eventually fully leaning into it, especially by the end of the film. And there's some interesting things with that I won't spoil that kind of sets up for a potential second another Tron film, because they definitely leave this a little bit open-ended with where they're going with the potential ones, especially with the mid-credits scene. Stick around, there is a mid-credit scene. There's not an end-credit scene in this film, but there's an early to mid-credit stinger that kind of teases what's potentially to come, which is a little intriguing. I kind of want to talk to you offline about that because we both know what it is, but definitely some interesting things in this film. The action on it is solid. There's good fighting in it, good action sequences. I still got to say, though, visually, it's the most impressive Tron film that we've seen so far, because there is so much more advancements in CGI and technology that they use a lot of in this film. And I want you to talk about your experience going to see this, because you got to have a little bit of a difference in viewing experience for me. I got to see it in your standard XD screening, which was phenomenal. The sound is amazing in those types of theaters, but you had just a little bit slightly different experience than I did. And I kind of want you to talk about your experience with that.
Yeah, I took my oldest to see it, and we went to Cinemark in XD, but we did the D-Box motion seats and in 3D. So not only were we tilting and rumbling and moving around, we had it in 3D, and I say that was probably the best kind of spectacle viewing that I've had of that engrossing of, all right, yeah, it's rumbling, it's moving as they're going through the opening sequence where they're kind of weaving through news stories within the grid and stuff, like we're floating around, and with the 3D causing everything to pop more. I would highly recommend watching it in that way, because it was so kind of immersive. It made the film feel so much better and different to me that I was having so much fun, because it was just the differences in the rumbles and the movements along with the 3D making those beautiful visuals really pop on screen. It was a really fun experience to do it in that way. Now, this is not something typical that everyone can do all the time. It was $20 a ticket to do something like that, which that price needs to go down. I get the technology's not cheap. They've got a couple rows of it there, but that's something that would be really fun if it was more accessible for more people, because if you're going with a group, like I said, it cost me and my daughter over $40 for just the two of us to go for tickets for that. It was worth it in the end, but it's not something you can do over and over again just because of how costly it is. But I had a great time doing it. It felt like I was more immersed and in what was going on with the visuals, at least in there. The story didn't grip and grab you as much as you would hope, but the visuals in that way was just so good, and the action just got you in it because you're feeling every bump and movement, and you're spinning out with the light cycles and everything else. It was such a fun experience.
Yeah, that's fun. I did get to go see this film before you did, and I recall sitting there in the theater watching it, and I was like, man, they're gonna have a lot of fun if those seats are set up and done right. It's gonna be a lot of fun. I'm not the biggest fan of 3D films. I typically avoid them when they're unless there's no option otherwise for viewing experiences. 3D doesn't do a ton for me, but I was sitting there watching that and was going, they're going to have an absolute blast watching this movie, because this film feels I would say the most suited for a 3D motion seat type format in a film I can remember in a long, long time. There's plenty of movies with moving seat potential, at least, that don't necessarily have to have the 3D aspect of it. I know you and I talked about it, how we wish we had those seats available to us when F1 came out. That would have been a fun film to see with the motion seats and everything. Obviously for the driving aspect, and it takes me back to the days of our amusement park up here, Kings Island, having the Days of Thunder ride with the motion seats and how fun that was always. but this film felt the most suited for that I can remember in a long time, being one that would be worth that investment in that time. And I'm glad you guys had that experience, because it looked like it would have been a lot of fun. And I'm glad you guys got to do that.
Yeah, it's kind of the perfect film if you need something just to highlight that type of experience. This is kind of the perfect film for that. Like, and I do want to go a little bit more into the story. We're not going to go too spoiler stuff, but I just got to talk about the inclusion of everything within. Like, I know some people are going to be disappointed because the main part of this story in movie is about bringing the grid into the real world. So most of the film takes place in the real world. You get very kind of little of the grid, and you do get some throwbacks to other grids and stuff, but the changes they made, even though they were kind of fun to see the original grid and other stuff, it made no sense to the overall story that they were trying to tell. Because, like I said, this has been 15 years between Tron Legacy and Tron Ares. And, you know, we left the grid and we left Flynn and everything certain ways. And it just felt like what they did with Flynn and what they did with the grids and stuff, just like, how does this connect to Legacy almost at all? Like, where is the connection? Where is the story? And the stuff that they did do with Flynn, like, this kind of doesn't make sense, because, you know, Tron Legacy, we ended with kind of Flynn, quote unquote, sacrificing himself. He had his chance to get out with his son and Cora to get back to the real world because he's been trapped in here. And it made sense how he was trapped for so long because of the rogue programs that were keeping him away, and he couldn't enter anywhere. And then this one, what they did with Flynn was like, he's got this and he hasn't left, but is this really Flynn? Is this a program? Is this, like, we don't know what it is. So like, there was so many stuff that we had set up and left with Tron Legacy was pretty much ignored going into this. So someone who, if you're looking at this as a third in a trilogy, it just didn't tie together with that story of Tron Legacy. And I went back and revisited Tron Legacy with my oldest, who's really got into Tron. We watched both of them before we came to Ares, and she was really excited, and she loved Ares and everything else. But rewatching it, I really enjoyed what they did with it. And the story, you know, it had its problems and stuff as well, but I think this one had more story issues because it started off strong and then it just kind of fell off into did you not really know how else you were going to try to do this type of feeling with the story?
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking for a ton of continuity there's not a ton of it, which is kind of problematic if you're presenting it in the same universe realm of the previous two films, and there's not a ton that connects them. There's very loose connections to it, so it kind of takes its own liberties, which I feel a little off put by that a little bit if I were to say, but the overall story was fine. I mean, you deal with, like you said, Ares, who is, you know, kind of playing this program that's kind of rejecting his programming and discovering what he wants to do with a potential life that he could live. And that's kind of the central theme of, you know, his journey throughout this whole film, that, you know, is kind of like, you have two parallel stories. You have the inter-company, you know, battle here between Dillinger and Incom, and then you also got Ares on his journey too, who kind of plays a role in this because he is a Dillinger program who's kind of gone rogue, and that's kind of the catalyst for most of the conflict of this film, where they're basically trying to stop him. Mm-hmm. And it's a ton of fun, but like, that's kind of where the depth of the story stops. So there's not a ton of it. Like you said, visual spectacle, check. Amazing soundtrack, check. Meaty story, not a check mark in my opinion. It's kind of an incomplete there because it's very loose, but I think they tried to focus so much more on the visual spectacle and the wow factor of the film that you're not diving as much into the meaty story development that you were kind of hoping for. Mm-hmm. And everything just kind of felt loosely connected to what had come before it, which is problematic if you're presenting it, like you said, as a third story to this overall story that you're trying to tell by calling it Tron. So you definitely missed on the connection part, which is a little disappointing, but like, it's still overall a solid movie. It's just, if you're going at it, thinking about it like this, you're not getting this.
You can't go in expecting a deep, fulfilling story that takes everything from Tron and Tron Legacy and really runs with it. It lightly grazes it, but then kind of, so it almost feels like a reboot, but not a reboot because it does show so much stuff from the original Tron. But Tron Legacy is the one that they kind of like, well, we're going to kind of forget about that it exists a little bit. And that's what kind of just made it just feel so weird. And then, as you mentioned, they set up clearly for a fourth Tron film. But that's also problematic if you know the history of it, because Tron 1, 1989, 21 years to get Tron Legacy. It's 15 years after Tron Legacy to get this. Is it going to be another 10, 15 years before we get a fourth Tron? Potentially we don't have Jeff Bridges anymore. So you had an opportunity in this one to finalize something with Flynn's story if you wanted to move on to something else outside of Flynn. And you just kind of dropped the ball on that. That's kind of what annoyed me most, because it's been so long since Tron Legacy. And like, all right, at least give us some final closure on Flynn and move on from it and go do your own thing. Have AI, new program, something like that. But they just kind of dropped the ball of being able to give a conclusion to Flynn's story.
Yeah, and that's probably the most disappointing thing about it, I would say. He doesn't feel like he's very important overall to the story at all. Like, this is a very heavy Ares and Eve Kim story. Very heavily that, like 98% that film, and you get just a little touch of Jeff Bridges in this, which is a little disappointing. I don't know what his availability was for the film, but the fact that he's barely in it at all and is kind of treated like a side character, like just kind of a throwaway character. Like,
it was. It felt like
you could have replaced his character with literally anything else, and it would have had the same impact on the story, which is a little disappointing because, like you said, we're presenting this as a third Tron film that's connected to the other two, but it is so loosely connected to that it almost feels like it's its own entity, which is okay if that's what you want going forward. But for those of us that like continuity in our storytelling, you got to close that loophole at some point. You gotta give some finality to that. And I really feel like they dropped the ball in getting us that. If you're kind of really going full bore away from it and kind of doing your own thing, it's fine to do, but tie up that loose end and give us that proper send off for that character to kind of like do your own thing. And I think if they were trying to do it, they failed miserably.
And like I said, Korra in Tron Legacy is this ISO. It's a being that's different than anything that had been created before. She ends up becoming the last one, but she's able to escape with Sam at the end of the movie, and you're kind of left with, all right, she's a human now. She's out in the real world. That's interesting. That's neat. But then you come into here where they're bringing characters out and they have the time limit and they have everything else. Like, there's nothing mentioned of the ISOs. There's nothing connected to that part of it. You bring in something completely different and new with the permanence and stuff, which you still tie back to Flynn, which, like, this guy was a video game creator. He was a hacker and software and stuff too, but you're still just putting so much onto his, well, he had this that he had created way back then, and he had this he created. Like, it's almost made him into this just otherworldly being. And like you said, you could have had anyone else do the Flynn cameo in this movie and it wouldn't have made a difference. Other than having it be Flynn ruins so much of that continuity that you had tried to establish between Tron and Tron Legacy. And that's my biggest problem with it. Like, I think the story of Ares, of this AI who is following commands as he's told, but as we know with most AI, it's learning and it's thinking and it's doing stuff. So it goes through Eve's files and it's kind of learning about human nature and it's seeing the good and the bad side of stuff. So he's kind of changing his thinking and his ideology of stuff, which happens kind of quickly as well in there, but you get that he's trying to evolve and change, and it's always changing. It's also the danger of AI, of just how you think you have control, of how you think you have this, but it can do whatever it wants in a completely different way, in multiple different ways. But then it just kind of, like, I don't know, it just didn't feel like it had that great of a payoff. But it was more me being annoyed at the fact of how they just kind of ignored Tron Legacy and just didn't give us anything solid with Flynn. Like, it would have been better just to leave him out of the movie than try to shoehorn him in like they did, because it just messed with so much stuff. Because we've gone into some spoilers. This is a big spoiler. He has a back door that he uses to help Ares out. But if he had that, why hasn't he left the grid?
Exactly.
Or where is he in the grid? Because we know there's something different about that Flynn. But it just made it messy.
It did. It made it very messy. And I'm holding out a sliver, just a sliver of hope that if they do this fourth film, you get that payoff. Because if you're just giving a little morsel of it here, you need to pay it off. Like if you're doing it for the fourth film, like this is how it's kind of, and we're going to dive more into it when we get to the fourth. Like, there's something happening in the grid now that could potentially make its way out into the real world as well. And there's going to be some type of major conflict. You got to have, Sam and Cora involved in this, and you got to have, like there's got to be more of that involvement in the real world if that's where you're going with it, right? So we'll see what they do with the fourth film. I would be remiss if we didn't leave the review without me talking about one of my personal favorite just highlight moments of the film. I was listening to Jared Leto talk about his love for certain bands and certain types of music. Because he is a not only is he an actor, obviously, but he's a world famous traveled musician, and just kind of hear him, the way he talks about certain bands and his love for them in this film just made me chuckle just a little bit as a thing. Because he's this AI entity. They're like, oh, you'd expect him to like, and they kind of poke fun at it a little bit. They're like, oh, I expected you to like this and this. He's like, well, you would think, but I love these guys because of X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, he's an
it was
AI that's obsessed with the 80s.
I love it. It's so funny. Like just that little bit of personality that he really gets to show in this was written pretty well, and I enjoyed that little bit of it. It's not a ton in the film, but it's just a little nuances and stuff like that I appreciate. But it was fun listening to talk about why he loved Duran Duran, or you know what I mean?
And Depeche Mode.
And Depeche Mode especially was really
solved
really
a Rubik's
fun.
Cube and other stuff like that.
It's kind of
there's some just throwbacks to the 80s, but also, as him a musician, as an actor. And it's one of those things, like he, not going to go anything about his personal life or anything that's pending going on with that, say and have what you want on it. With that, but you do get majority of the time when you have people who are actors who can sing, they want to shoehorn in them doing music, and I like that was the way they shoehorned in music with him. Instead of having him sing or perform or something else like that, he's talking about as an AI, his love of Depeche Mode and other stuff like that, like because they're driving in the car and he's talking to Eve about stuff, and then he just goes into instantly naming the title of the song, and she's like, what did you just say to me? Oh no, Depeche Mode, like 1989 or whatever it was, and just go start talking about the song as they're zigzagging through traffic at breakneck speeds and stuff. He's just talking about his love for this song, and that was a fun moment.
It was fun. I got a lot of enjoyment out of that for sure.
Yeah, but this one was tough because, as we've mentioned, sound-wise, just Nine Inch Nails came in and was fantastic because they kind of blended a little bit of what Daft Punk did with Tron Legacy, along with the Nine Inch Nails sound that to make it all fit and work within this kind of having classic sounds from the original Tron, blending stuff from Tron Legacy with the soundtrack, with all that. They knocked it out of the park. The visuals were great, beautiful to look at, and it was a spectacle to watch. It's just disappointing how they kind of dropped the ball with trying to tell an interconnected story while not connecting it to the story.
Yeah, I would agree with that wholeheartedly. There was so many more opportunities to kind of tie up some loose ends here, and maybe they do that with the fourth film. I don't know, but
will it take 20 years to get the fourth film?
I hope not. I mean, if they're already kind of teasing it, we don't really have that from any of the other two Tron films as kind of a teaser for what's to come. So you got to wonder if they're already working on the fourth one. Hopefully, if they're teasing something coming, like they're still yet to be determined whether they're going forward with the fourth film. I'm not expecting it to do commercially too well. The viewing in my theater was pretty sparse, not very heavily attended. Like I think there may have been 25, 30 people in my movie theater when I went and saw it, which is very light. I'm hearing some mixed reviews on the actual film now that I've seen it. Kind of start looking. I don't look at reviews before I go see a movie. I'll kind of look at what the consensus is after it, and it still doesn't really affect my score when we do our grading, but it's definitely been a bit of a mixed bag as far as reviews go. I know some people who absolutely loved it, and some people were just like kind of feeling about it the way we feel about it. So I'm interested to see how you grade it here.
Yeah, so Tron Ares was a visual spectacle. It looked gorgeous. The special effects were really well done. Just the style they shot it and the integrations of kind of that style that they started with Tron Legacy did carry over here, and they did, add on to that. Visually stunning. Audio, soundtrack wise, Nine Inch Nails was fantastic. It was a lot of fun, but they did drop the ball with the story. There's so much that after 15 years, we were hoping to get some, continuation on from Tron Legacy, but it almost ignores Tron Legacy and what it does do with the story from the original Tron and Tron Legacy. Just felt like it just threw anything that they were trying to have connected out the window, because it just kind of ruined that integration, that connection between all of them. But it was a lot of fun to watch. If you turn your brain off to the story, you could have quite a lot of fun with it. I mean, it starts off pretty strong. It's that kind of second half where it falters a bit. I'm going to give this a 7.5 because visually and audio, it was stunning and spectacular. And me and my daughter had a ton of fun doing that immersive moving seat 3D for all of it. That made for such a fun theatrical experience that I can probably give it a little higher just because I had so much fun watching it, even if the story disappointed me.
Yeah, it's very interesting you landed on a 7.5. I'm giving it a 6.5 myself, and that's purely due to the visual spectacle and everything. I feel like the story was such a miss for me, as far as like expecting it to be a continuation of Tron Legacy and Tron before it. Like, it feels like it's kind of doing its own thing while kind of very loosely connecting it to what's come before it. I don't feel like that's necessarily the best choice to make when it comes to making a Tron film, to just kind of throw away, pun intended, the legacy that the previous two films have created in this world. But you said no issues with the sound or visuals. Those are phenomenal. Those make it kind of this spectacle experience that you really want out of a film. But due to kind of the lackluster story that came out of it, I have to knock it down significantly more. You could probably talk me to bumping it up to a 7. Basically, I think I'm being a little extra harsh on it, but I really, really was hoping for more of that connection to Tron Legacy at minimum, and it feels like it just took what Tron Legacy did and just forgot it existed in a lot of cases. And it feels like they got to the end of the movie before they finally realized, like, hey, we got to do something to talk about to deal with what happened here, because it's so very loosely connected to it up until like the last third of the film, where anything even remotely close to talking about Legacy gets involved in it. And that's a bit of a disappointment here for me. Mm-hmm. If you took out the fact that it was supposed to be connected, I'd probably score it a little bit higher. Like, it's fine as a standalone movie, but if you're presenting it as a continuation of something, they definitely missed the mark on that, and I have to be a little more critical of it.
Yeah, and I wholeheartedly agree with what you had. Like, I was probably around a 7, but as I do, if I take my kids to it,
sure, that's
and
fair,
they get a lot of enjoyment out of it, I give like an extra half point for the kids. But it was also the experience that me and my daughter had together, doing the motion and rumble seats that synced up to the movie with the 3D.
That's
like
awesome.
It was a fun theatrical experience in that way that I would highly recommend doing, even if the story was lackluster. That made it such just kind of an experience to watch the film, and that gave the extra points for me to take it up from like around a 7 to 7.5, just because it was a fun experience to watch with my daughter, and she absolutely loved it. Because she's not, she's around teenage age, so she's not fully as in depth and worrying about the story aspects as we who grew up on the original and have been following this for 30 years to almost 40 years to, really care about where that story is. She's not as caring as much of that the second half fell off. So it got that extra points because of that from my daughter and our experience that we had watching it.
Totally fair, totally valid, right? Like, I would probably have given it a 7 had I gone and done the moving seat experience too. Like, it looked like that could have been a lot of fun. Like, I would have enjoyed the film more had I been moving around the entire time, with the cutscenes and the action and stuff that they do well. It's just so much of a miss in connecting that story in any type of way that really dragged down the overall score for me. If you're just giving it a score based on purely a criteria of visuals and sound, it's one of the better films we've seen in a while, just from that perspective, because visually it is cool as hell. Like, the visual effects were done spectacularly in this movie. And like you said, you have that darker, grittier visual aesthetic matched with a darker, grittier band like Nine Inch Nails, providing a soundtrack for it. It's a perfect marriage, in my opinion, for that. It definitely elevates the movie experience, having that connection to it. And if that weren't involved, I probably would have tanked the film even further. Like, it raises the level of the film that much for me personally, because it does the visuals so well. The music's phenomenal in it to match the tone of the movie, which is so important, because you can throw great music into any film and it may not always make sense. Like, this is a perfect marriage of that darker, grittier tone with a band like Nine Inch Nails, who are known for more of that darker, grittier sound. And you get that marriage so well done in this that really helps the film, in my opinion.
And if you're a fan of Nine Inch Nails, like we are before, this
Absolutely.
film, we've been fans for a long time. Look in the film. There might be a special cameo waiting for you in there if you're a fan of the band, which was kind of a nice touch and stuff
awesome.
to see in that. But yeah, like most of my with this, which is kind of a bit different from like the other scores I've given to movies, is based mostly on the experience and less about the story. And I'm pretty big on story and stuff. And like it got a little bit higher because of that immersive experience of the seats in the 3D and the visuals and the sound. Like
It's a good
I
marriage.
was able to give it more of the turn your brain off and go watch this movie and not worry about the story. And you're going to have a fun time because of the visual spectacle and the audio, and go see it. And if you have the 40X or the, D box seats or something like that, this is one that I think is worth that extra money to have that kind of experience for it, because it made it so much more where I was annoyed by the shortfalls of the story, but that helped me kind of not care as much. Like probably on a second viewing at home, I'm going to be much more critical on
Probably.
the story, because it starts off pretty solid. It just really,
really did.
drops the ball around the like 60% mark of the film. And you have some, like I was looking forward to a few actors that are in here and thought they had bigger roles, and they were in there for like 30 seconds.
Not much involvement of it at all. But it is the film that we got, and that's kind of an interesting thing to pay attention to moving forward with, especially these types of films. If you get to go having that more immersive experience, how much does it enhance your enjoyment? And are you willing to be more forgiving of a little bit of a lackluster story if the experience is heightened because you get to have that immersive experience? It absolutely plays a part in grading films. Like you said, if you have a much more in-depth experience watching a movie, does it enhance the film for you? Does it take away from it? Is there one where they don't do it as well, and it's just like, I was so distracted by this, I couldn't pay attention to the film as much as I wanted to? Because that's very much a possibility as well, because like you said, those seats exist for every film and they sell them for every movie. Are you trying to sit in that for like a romantic comedy? Does that really help you like with the film, or is it so distracting you're like, I could only focus on what the heck was happening because my seats were moving? Like,
Yeah, like they had it for one battle after another, which we really enjoyed the film. Go back and see what we thought of it, but I couldn't
imagine.
think of anything in that film that other than 30 seconds here, 30 seconds there, 30 seconds there would make it worth, that type of seats. Stuff like Avatar with Tron, with superhero movies, those are the ones that really make that type of immersive experience more, because I had never done it before. We took the kids for the first time and did it with Bad Guys 2, which was okay. It was kind of mediocre because it had some action stuff in it, but it didn't really that was fun. But I want to see something that actually makes it worth the cost, and Tron Ares was one that made it worth the cost to me.
That's awesome. But Tron Ares is in theaters now. Go check it out. Go see it in the enhanced experience if you can, if you have that option available to you. Really think it would help your enjoyment of this film. But yeah, if you've seen it, come to our social media pages, come to our YouTube comments, come to our Discord, talk to us about the film in there. We'd love to talk about it with you. And if we're missing the mark, if we're overlooking something, let us know. But I think we're pretty spot on in our evaluation of this one for sure, because it's definitely one that I really wish could have been done a little bit better story-wise. But yeah, it was still a fun experience. Like you said, the visuals and music in this were top-notch.
Yeah, we can definitely see why it can be polarizing between the reviewers and the critics and stuff, because of just kind of how messy the story ended up being, because it starts off so promising.
For sure. It's definitely one that I'm interested to see how I feel about it if I watch it again. To find all of the episodes of We'll Bring the Popcorn, go to our YouTube page, hit the like and subscription button so you're getting our episodes when they drop each and every Monday. If you're listening to us in the audio room on any of the podcasting platforms that we're on, please don't forget to give us a 5-star review. It really helps elevate the profile of the show. And don't forget to go to willbringthepopcorn.com, where it has all of our archive videos, all of our social media information, as well as our merch store, so you continue to support the show in that way. We cannot thank you enough for your continued support.